Welcome to Women Don't Do That, where we empower you with inspiration, knowledge, and skills to redefine your boundaries and unleash your potential. I'm Stephanie Minton, founder and CEO of Beacon North Strategies and your guide. Small town girl turned CEO while navigating career, motherhood, ADHD, and chronic migraines. Our conversations range from interviews with visionary women to solo episodes filled with actionable insights. We are your hub for turning what ifs into let's go. Are you ready to redefine your possible? Let's get started. In today's podcast, we are going to be talking all about business partnerships. So if you are wondering about entrepreneurship or becoming a founder or starting a business partnership, then this is the conversation for you. I'm going to talk more about my own experience with partnerships, what's worked, what hasn't, and answer some of the questions from my own experience as a business owner about partnerships and some of the questions I get. So many people wonder, do I need a business partner? Where do I start? How do I make sure that my partnership is successful? So we are going to dive into all of that today. I run multiple ventures. Women Don't Do That, which you're listening to right now, which is a podcast to inspire women to do whatever it is they think they can't. This podcast actually started with a partner and is now run solo. So we'll unpack that a little bit. I also own Beacon North Strategies, which is a boutique public affairs firm that specializes in government relations. That is solo run. Same with Beacon North Mentorship Academy, which is professional development for people in public affairs. In the future, we will be also offering courses to the broader public. That is solo owned. And then NextGen, which some of you have heard about as well, which is an annual public affairs conference for professional development for people in public affairs. And that is done with a partner. So we will talk more about that today. Of course, this is just who owns these ventures. However, some of these are, of course, supported by other team members, which I'm very grateful for. So we're going to talk a little bit about some of the lessons from past and present partnerships. So when I started the podcast, I started it with Miranda Novak. Some of you who are longtime listeners will remember Miranda, and Miranda is such a huge supporter still of the podcast today. She usually does the year-end wrap-up with me, and once in a while jumps on to talk about different issues or to take over for me when I'm not able to do an interview. She is amazing. When we first started the podcast, however, we won it. We won the whole thing. There was no formal agreement. It was just trust, a shared vision, and friendship. It worked really well. But I did take a different approach for NextGen, which is more business and a formal partnership. So with NextGen, we set clear responsibilities and legal agreements upfront to ensure fairness and prevent misunderstandings. So to talk through kind of all of those details from the beginning, my partnership with my partner Natasha from NHM Connect has been incredibly rewarding, both personally and professionally. As a CEO, you don't often get mentored by others and you're kind of alone sometimes. However, in being with partnership with Natasha, both of us have grown our skill sets. And so that has been a lot of fun and very rewarding. You don't feel so alone. And she's just an amazing person to work with. And I've been very thankful for her. I also knew that working on something like NextGen, I needed additional expertise and additional capacity, which were both things that Natasha could bring. So what makes a great business partnership? Things like complementary skills. So you don't need two people who can do the same things. This is something that works really well with NextGen. Natasha and I have similar skills, but they are different, and we bring different strengths to the team. We have trust and shared values. We have integrity, strong work ethic. And I think probably the most important thing when you're creating a partnership is that you have these shared values that everything is built on top of. Because if you have shared values, then everything else can work itself out. If you don't, that's where you can run into problems. Having things like regular check-ins, ensuring balanced workload and decision-making, and asking the difficult questions. Having clear legal agreements. You have contracts set up ahead of time to prevent ambiguity and keep things professional. Strong communication. Disagreements aren't arguments, they're just things to talk through. And check your ego. When your partner succeeds, you succeeds too. It's about the business, not just you. The other thing I would say that has been very successful for us is that we have worked together before. And so I know her work ethic, I know her values. And being able to have proof points where you've worked on projects together is a great way to build a partnership. I also did this with my first staff person. We did subcontracting with him for a year before he was brought on full time. And so that allowed me to have the proof points of his skill set to build the business, to bring him on board, and build that more permanent partnership together. How do you handle conflicts and decision making in partnerships? So if you and your partner hit a roadblock, one thing to do is to just take a break, uh, talk about the fact that you don't agree, and come back later when you have a fresh perspective and you're ready to discuss it again. Other things you can do is to maybe get advice. There was one issue that we were facing for the NextGen conference where we got advice and from other people and came back and shared that advice with each other and talked it through. Maybe you could talk to somebody who's been in the business longer or has more experience than you. If your partner is really passionate about an idea and it's something you can let go of it. You don't need to win every argument or every decision. There's give and take on both sides. And as long as there is give and take on both sides, that can work out really well. Knowing who your partner is and what they value helps build trust. And of course, when choosing Natasha for NextGen, it was not only about who she is as a person, but also about those complementary skills that I mentioned earlier. So in terms of frequently asked questions, what are some of the things that we get asked related to partnerships? How do you find the right business partner? As I mentioned before, for me, it was about already knowing the person, understanding their values, having worked with them before, knowing we could work together. Also, sometimes starting small, doing a test of a proof of concept. When Natasha and I first started NextGen, we promised the commitment to each other of trying it for 1 year and then that we would revisit it. So maybe start small. Start with some test projects or for a period of time or just to do a little bit together and to see how that goes. And another question related to finding the right business partner sometimes is, should you work with friends or family? There are definitely a lot of pros and cons to that. Personally, I don't know that I would necessarily want to work too much with family. However, Natasha was my friend before. We've actually become closer from our partnership. Miranda from Women Don't Do That and I were friends before and are still friends afterwards. So there are times that it can work out. However, you need to do some of these base things that I chatted about earlier to make sure that things are in the right place to take that next steps. What qualities make a good business partner? So things like strong values, trust, complementary skills, as we've already mentioned. What if I want to start a business but don't have a good partner? Should you go solo or actively seek one? I think one thing to keep in mind is that as women, we often feel like we need a partner. I think there's some comfort in that, but you are fully capable, likely, of doing it alone. And you really should think about strategically what makes sense for you. Maybe you need a different skill set that you don't have. Maybe you can hire that skill set. Maybe you need to build a partnership. But critically thinking about whether you need one or not, and not just assuming you do or going to that because it's more comfortable, is a good question to ask. But if you don't know anybody and you want to build a partnership or you need to build a partnership, think about networking and finding like-minded entrepreneurs. You can join some business groups. You would be surprised how many chambers of commerce or different kinds of business groups, even for particular sectors, exist once you start looking around. How do you handle differences in worth ethic or effort? One thing I would say is that if you've done your groundwork, you probably know what that person is already like. And so you avoid these kinds of issues. But have frank conversations. One thing with Natasha and I is that even when our event finished, we had a conversation. Was the workload fair? Was it, how did that work? When there were periods of time where one of us felt like there was too much work, we talked about it. What happens more with us is one person will work more and one person works less based on other things they have going on in their business. And then that tends to flip back and forth throughout the year. And that's fine. So regularly have conversations, assess it. And what's a way to bring it up without being conflicting? Be direct, open, and honest. What do you do if you and your partner have different working styles? I know, from being in partnerships that sometimes maybe one person is less organized than the other. Well, then that one person brings the organization and the other person brings other skill sets. So appreciate the skill sets that you do have and try to support your partner as much as you can on where your weaknesses are. But there are strengths and weaknesses, and instead of being focused on the weaknesses, focus on the strengths. And if you've picked the right partners, then hopefully those will complement each other. So there are some of the ways that you can work through some of those things. How do you end a business relationship on good terms? One thing I would say is that, again, if you've done some of the front end things, you've created contracts, you can have some of these exit strategies already in place. How do you handle legal and financial matters? Again, set that in place from the very beginning. Can you still remain friends or professional contacts afterwards? Yes. Miranda is still one of my best friends, even though we aren't in a partnership for Women Don't Do That. And that's okay. How do you bring up tough conversations? I would say my approach to difficult topics, money, effort, goals, is always to establish open and honest conversations and communications from the start and to not take things too personally. So when you say we're going to have open communication, then you're going to have difficult conversations. And it's better to have that information out in the open. Maybe one person doesn't like something that you've done or how you've handled something, or you're getting more attention in the media for what you've done or something like that. Just have a conversation with it instead of wondering or ruminating about it or letting it boil up. Just have a conversation. And in doing that, the other person needs to accept that those are difficult conversations and to not take them so personally, because that just won't work. So you need to be very mature about all of this in order to have something like a business partnership work out. You can set ground rules for transparency. That's something that Natasha and I did from the beginning and that we've always done. We're very kind, empathetic, smart, hardworking people. And so having conversations about difficult issues isn't difficult for us. And so even if there was a disagreement, it wouldn't be a problem. And so I think that's what's made that partnership so strong. Should you split ownership 50-50? It depends on a lot of factors. For NextGen, that is something that's done because we contribute equally financially and resource-wise in terms of staff time. But we check in on things like this regularly in terms of, how that work is being shared equally. But yeah, so it just depends how things are set up. If you're doing 3/4 of the work, or that output is really focused on your expertise, then maybe that looks differently. So I think it depends on the situation. And maybe that's where you get advice from a lawyer. How do you balance friendship and business? Natasha and I have become better friends. Probably I would say Miranda and my friendship grew in our partnership as well and have continued to be very close friends afterwards. I think business is business, right? And you need to be mature enough to recognize the difference. And you can definitely be really good friends afterwards and during. At least that's worked for me. I would say something else to keep in mind is women often struggle to say no. And how do you avoid pressure into starting a partnership even? Just because someone suggests a partnership doesn't mean you have to do it. Let's say somebody approached me when I was ready to start Beacon North Strategies. Well, maybe it's a good idea to have a partner, but maybe it's not. I've gone it alone and it's worked. Lots of other people started with partnerships and that works too. But you don't have to just say yes for the sake of saying yes. Think about what actually works for you and what makes sense for your business and what you're trying to achieve. You can still connect with other entrepreneurs for advice without committing to a business relationship. For instance, with Natasha and I, we connect on a lot of other business issues and give each other advice and listen to each other beyond NextGen, because that one, because we're friends, but also because that benefits our businesses to be able to share that kind of advice with each other. So, final takeaways for listeners on business partnerships. Not every business needs a partner. So, make sure you're doing it for the right reasons. And make sure you're setting those objectives right from the beginning. Natasha and I come back a lot to what are the original objectives of what we're trying to do. And so, when we're making decisions, it's like, does it align with those goals? The best partnerships are built on trust, complementary skills, and shared values, as I mentioned. Be intentional about the structure, the communications, and the expectations. What works well at the start doesn't always stay that way without the effort. So it's something that you constantly have to work on. Maybe a partnership's not right for you, but if it is, then these ground rules will really help you set up a strong foundation to have a successful partnership. Feel free to ask me questions at any time about business, starting a business, entrepreneurship, what that's like. I love talking about this stuff. I've been doing it for quite a few years now, and I am happy to talk about it at any time. So feel free to jump into my DMs. Love having those conversations and seeing other people grow and soar. So thanks for listening to this conversation today about partnerships. I hope it's giving you food for thought, and that if you decide to enter into one, that you'll be better equipped to do so. Have a great day. Thanks for joining us on Women Don't Do That. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a rating or review. Connect with us on Instagram at WOMENdon'tDOthat and visit our website www.WOMENdon'tDOthat.com for more details. Join our Patreon to support our work. Find all of the links in the show notes. Remember, you have the power to transform your what ifs into let's go. Together, let's redefine your possible. Until next time. The opinions expressed by guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views of Women Don't Do That, Stephanie Mitton, or affiliated brands.